$7,800. That is the entire price of the BYD Seagull. For the price of a used 2014 Honda Civic with 100,000 miles and a mysterious sticky stain on the back seat, you can buy a fully electric car in Asia. And by that, I don't mean a golf cart with doors. I mean a car with a leather steering wheel, a rotating infotainment screen, airbags that actually work, and styling by the same guy who used to design Lamborghinis. Meanwhile, let's look at the competition. The cheapest electric vehicle in the United States costs about $29,000. We have been told for years that Chinese cars are junk, that they are knockoffs, that they are dangerous. And that was true until about 15 minutes ago. Because while jokes were made about made in China quality, they were building a machine designed to eat the Western auto industry alive. And the reason the US government is currently panic building a tariff wall shows just that. This video will show you how an authoritarian regime speedran the Industrial Revolution, and why in 20 years the Ford F-150, just like any European car, might just be a collector's item for rich people, all because China is panicking. To understand why this is happening right now, you have to realize that this wasn't an accident. China is seen as a place that copies things. They see an iPhone, so they make a worse iPhone. But the EV dominance didn't come from copying. It came from a cold, calculated realization that happened way back in 2001. Back then, the United States was the undisputed king in terms of production volume. General Motors was printing money, selling massive SUVs like the Hummer. Gas was cheap, and the present and future were and would be oil. But in Beijing, the leadership was looking at a map when they freaked out. They realized that China has a massive problem. They don't have enough oil, and about 80% of oil they import has to pass through the Strait of Malacca, which is a tiny choke point in the ocean that the US Navy could close in about 20 minutes if a war ever started. If China stayed addicted to gas cars, they would always be hostage. But they had another problem. They couldn't build gas engines. If we're tracing the family tree of the automobile, we have to admit it has unmistakably German roots. The whole concept was essentially birthed by the folks at what is now Mercedes-Benz, and for the longest time, the center of gravity for innovation refused to leave Europe. Even after the chaos of the Second World War, the industry rebuilt itself on the back of the Volkswagen Beetle, a car with a complicated history, to put it mildly. For decades, the Chinese car market was basically a European annex. It was the era of the joint venture, where heavy hitters like Volkswagen did all the engineering in Wolfsburg, and the cars were merely assembled in Shanghai. Believe me, they tried. When China finally decided to export their own homegrown designs to Europe back in 2005, well, let's just say the results were architectural. And by that, I mean they folded like accordions. Companies like Mercedes, but also Ford, had a 100-year head start. They had tribal knowledge passed down for generations. China realized they could spend 50 years trying to catch up to a German engine, and they would still be second best. So in 2001, an engineer named Wang Gang made a pitch to the Communist Party. He told them, "We will never beat the West at the old game, so let's change the game." He proposed that China skips the internal combustion engine entirely, shift the entire industrial might of the nation to batteries, because in an electric world, 100 years of experience making gas engines is worthless. In an electric world, everyone starts from zero. This is what we call leapfrogging. It's the same reason mobile payments in China are 10 years ahead of the US. They didn't have a credit card system, so they went straight to digital payments. While American CEOs were focused on quarterly earnings, China started a 24-year marathon. They poured money into battery chemistry when it was boring. They bought mines in Africa when nobody was looking, and they waited. But still, Westerners think that the Chinese government just subsidized their companies. They make it sound like the government just wrote a check to BYD and said, "Here, go win." If only it were that simple. The Chinese government flooded the market with cash to create a gold rush. At the peak, there were nearly 500 different electric vehicle startups in China. Imagine if the US had 500 versions of Tesla, all fighting for the same customers, the same workers, and the same grants. It was the industrial equivalent of those massive tour groups pushing and shoving for a photo spot. Companies were building cars that fell apart in the rain. They were faking battery data. They were setting money on fire. And the government watched. Failures didn't not get any help. The government just let them die. In 2019, Beijing decided the game was over. They changed the subsidy rules overnight. They said, if your battery doesn't have this much range and this much density, you get $0. Instantly, hundreds of companies went bankrupt. Billions of dollars of investor capital evaporated. Factory workers were fired by the thousands. Early EV cars were left rotting in fields. Literal graveyards of EVs that you can see on satellite maps today. But it worked. The companies that survived this bloodbath, BYD, Geely, Alcatel, survived because they were forced to become hyper-efficient killing machines. Europe is the canary in the coal mine of the green transition. It moved first, and now it's dead. For decades, German engineering was the gold standard. If you drove a Mercedes or a Volkswagen, you had status. But today, Volkswagen, the company that literally invented the people's car, is discussing closing factories in Germany for the first time in its 87-year history. They are closing them because they cannot build a cheap electric car, and BYD can. For decades, Europe lectured the world about climate change. They demanded we all switch to green energy. But the moment China actually offered them an affordable electric car to solve climate change, Europe panicked. They realized that saving the planet matters less than saving Volkswagen's dividends. So now, Europe is following the US and slapping tariffs on these cars. The prestige has shifted from the German badge to the Chinese operating system. And if the German auto empire, the best in the world, is crumbling, do you really think Ford and GM are safe? So how do you build a car for $9,000? If you think the answer is just slave labor, you are coping. The answer is physics, and a willingness to get very, very dirty. For the last 15 years, Western automakers have been obsessed with NMC batteries, which stands for nickel, manganese, cobalt. These are the divas of the battery world. They are powerful, but they require cobalt. Cobalt is expensive, and mining it is a humanitarian nightmare. China said, that's too expensive for us. They dusted off an old, rejected technology called LFP, lithium iron phosphate. Western engineers laughed at LFP. They called it low-tech. They said it was too heavy and too weak. And they were right. LFP is weaker, but LFP has one massive advantage. It uses iron and phosphate. They are dirt. They are fertilizer. They are cheaper than the plastic bags you put them in. While the West was trying to cook a gourmet meal using diamonds, China figured out how to make a Michelin star dinner out of dirt. But to make dirt work, they had to change the packaging. American cars are built like Russian nesting dolls. You take the battery cells, put them in a module, put the module in a pack, and put the pack in the car. Every layer adds steel, wiring, and brackets. It adds weight. At BYD, they invented the blade battery. They took the battery cell itself and made it the structural beam of the car. They glued the cells directly to the chassis. By deleting all the useless brackets, they freed up 50% more space. So even though their dirt chemistry is weaker, they can fit twice as much of it in the same space, and it costs half the price of a Tesla pack. But there is a dark side to this efficiency. In the West, they have NIMBYs, not in my backyard. They don't want lithium mines in Nevada, and no processing plants in Germany. They are messy, pollute the water, and turn rivers neon green with toxic sludge. So we made a deal with the devil. You do the dirty work. You poison your soil. We will just buy the clean finished battery, is what they said. China responded, deal. They accepted the environmental destruction because they knew it gave them leverage. Now, clean cars are driven in California, pretending to have saved the world, while the toxic runoff flows in Inner Mongolia. So why can't we just copy them? Why can't Ford just look at the blade battery and say, okay, let's do that? Because they are trapped in a prison of their own making. We call this the legacy trap. American automakers are dragging around 100 years of baggage. This baggage takes multiple forms. First, Ford doesn't make Fords. Not really. They're what's called integrators, which is corporate speak for we assemble other people's shit. Their chips originate in Taiwan, seats come from Mexico, glass from Ohio. Each step of the chain adds margin to the equation. As you may have guessed, BYD actually owns the lithium mines. They make the batteries, they make the computer chips, they even built their own massive cargo ships to transport the cars. BYD cuts out the middleman, because they are the middleman. Actually, they even started out as a battery manufacturer. Second, and more importantly, they are trapped by Wall Street. This is the real villain. If the CEO of General Motors went on TV tomorrow and said, hey everyone, we need to beat China. So we are going to stop making a profit for 10 years. We are going to take all our cash and build mines. Our stock price will crash, and no one will get a dividend. She would be fired before the commercial break ended. American capitalism is addicted to the quarterly report. We optimize for the stock price today, not the market share in 2035. While GM spent $40 billion buying back its own stock to make rich investors richer, China spent that money building the supply chain that now rules. But if you think this flood of cheap cars is just a sign of China's strength, you are missing the most important piece of the puzzle. It is actually a sign of panic. Right now, China's domestic economy is on life support. Their real estate market has collapsed. Youth unemployment is extremely high. This creates a massive problem for the Communist Party. They have built these gigantic factories. Millions of workers are employed because of it. If those factories stop running, the workers lose their jobs. If the workers lose their jobs, they get angry. And an angry population is the one thing the party fears more than the US Navy. So the factories must keep running. Even if nobody in China is buying the cars, they have to build them. This is called overcapacity. China is currently producing millions of cars that have nowhere to go, so they are putting them on boats and shipping them. They are dumping them on the global market at rock-bottom prices, not just to kill their industry, but to save their own skin. Every cheap Seagull that lands in Europe is a job saved in Shenzhen and a job lost in Germany. If you've made it this far without subscribing, you're basically the Western auto industry, enjoying the ride without investing in the future. The United States slapped a 100% tariff on Chinese EVs. That's for national security. They say, oh, these cars are spying on us. And sure, maybe they are. But let's be real. If the Seagull cost $50,000, nobody would care about the data privacy. These tariffs are solely because their cars are better and cheaper than anything General Motors or Mercedes can build. When you protect an industry from competition, it doesn't get stronger. It gets fat, lazy, and stupid. They're forcing American consumers to pay $50,000 for a car because we are too afraid to let them choose the $10,000 option. It buys Ford a few more years of profits, but it guarantees that in 10 years, American cars will be uncompetitive garbage that nobody outside of America wants to buy. But America and Europe are not the world. There are 8 billion people on this planet. Only 1 billion live in the West. The other 7 billion live in Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, and India. These are the people of whom some are just entering the middle class. They don't care about the trade war. They care that the Toyota Corolla costs $25,000 and the BYD Seagull costs $10,000. So obviously, China is systematically capturing these markets. In 20 years, the idea of the American and European auto industry might be as historical as the British textile industry. Something people study in history books to understand how empires lose their edge. The future is electric, it is cheap, and right now it speaks Mandarin. You know who else speaks Mandarin? All of the Chinese tourists are becoming richer and richer, traveling everywhere. Check the video about that here. Also, to see more about the other superpowers of Asia and how they would be unbeatable if they worked together, see this.